Hey everyone. Okay, so today what I'm going to be talking about today is called DDNS. So DDNS stands for Dynamic Domain Name System. So I'm basically going to be talking about what's the purpose of why we use DDNS and what it could be used for. In my case, I just recently self-taught myself about DDNS. It actually follows some of the same concepts as DNS, so we're going to go ahead and talk about that. So for starters, before we get into DDNS, we actually need to talk about what actually is DNS. Kind of like a refresher. So DNS basically is, so you have your computer over here. Now I apologize, I know I'm not the best drawer, but so you have your computer over here, and your computer is trying to access a website online. So this is the server that is in the World Wide Web. So say you want to access like youtube.com. Well, when you put in youtube.com onto your computer, it gets sent out to the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web on the server outside of your house, it searches, okay, well, youtube.com, it searches for the IP address of youtube.com, and it comes across this IP address. So once the outside server finds the IP address, it basically takes that IP address and then it sends it back to your computer to allow you to access youtube.com. So it does all of this behind the scenes that you don't actually see. So all you have to do is type in youtube.com, and when it gets sent out, as you can see here, so youtube.com gets sent out, gets turned into an IP address, and then that IP address gets sent back to your computer and allows you access to the website. So that in a nutshell is pretty much what DNS is. But today we're going to be talking about what DDNS is, which is Dynamic Domain Name System. Okay, so with DDNS, the way that DDNS works is pretty much in your home system. So say this is your house and you have all of your appliances, like you have a router, you have a computer, you have your home server, things like that. All of these are all accessed with one IP address, which we call the public IP address. So say your IP address is 215.114.85.17. So say this is your public IP address. So if this computer over here wants to access your IP address, it goes through the internet and it goes into your home router and it goes back to the internet and it goes back to the computer. So by doing this process, what it uses is it uses your public IP address. So the thing with dynamic IP addresses, which is typically what most home networks have due to your ISP. So your ISP stands for your internet service provider. So typical internet service providers use a method called DHCP, and this is what gives you dynamic IP addresses. So what that means is your IP address is forever changing. So your IP address can change depending on how frequently your ISP wants it to change. So one moment it could be 215. The next moment you're looking at like a 115, 205, 17, 16, and then the next moment you're looking at a 206, 17, 25, 10. Your IP address is always going to be frequently changing. So If you're over here, say at your local Starbucks, and you're trying to access your public IP address of 215.114.85.17, and you remembered it because you went into your router and you saw your public IP address and you know what your public IP address is, and when you try to use this public IP address to access your house, but then say it changes to the second one, well, okay, well, that first one is no longer your IP address anymore. Now it changed. So that is where DDNS comes into play, because with DDNS, you can forever assign a URL. So you can assign a URL to equal your public IP. And that means that when your public IP updates, so does that URL at the same exact time. So that is the main purpose of why we use DDNS. Okay, and so just as we mentioned earlier about with DDNS, I'm going to tell you the main reasons of why you choose DDNS over using just a typical DNS. So for starters, your as I mentioned already, your DDNS. So your DDNS uses dynamic. Dynamic means it's always changing. That's what dynamic means. So dynamic is what every household uses within their home network, typically, unless you pay money for a what's called a static IP. So in terms of static IP, that's where DNS comes into play, because DNS uses just typical static IP. So with a static IP, say that your public IP address is the 215, but say it's a static IP address. So that means that this IP address will never change. It won't go through the changes that your ISP wants you to do, just like I mentioned earlier. So it won't change to this 115, and it won't change to this 206, and it won't change to other ones. It'll constantly always stay at 215. So you wouldn't even have to worry about doing a DDNS because you have a static IP. If you have a static IP, you can just run just a normal DNS. But in my particular case, I have an IP address that runs with dynamic, so that's why I chose to run DDNS. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a website called NoIP. This is the website I use to obtain my free DDNS URL. And I'm going to basically show you what it actually looks like firsthand to have a DDNS URL and how to set it up and where you're going to go. Okay, so here we are at the main page of noip.com. So as you can see up here in the corner, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make an account. So I actually did sign up for an account. It's completely free. Just go ahead and sign up. And this is actually going to be very crucial, because if you don't create an account, you actually can't link your DDNS to your home router. So once I created an account, you can see here that this is my DDNS URL right here that I created. So mine says datatransferserver.ddns.net. And you can actually come in here and you can click on modify, and you can either delete it, add a new one. As far as I know so far, you can add as many as you like, but right now I just have only one. And you can also see on here the update portion. So this is what I was talking about when I was saying that your IP address, when it changes, so does your DDNS URL. It updates with each other. So this is where you'll find the last update, and right here in the blacked out portion, this is actually going to be your public IP. So I have mine blocked out just for safety reasons. I don't want to share my public IP, but right there in the IP/target, that's going to be your public IP address. So once you pretty much have all that information and you have created your free DDNS URL, I'm basically going to show you the next step in how to connect your DDNS URL to your actual home network. Okay, so to connect your DDNS, what you're going to want to do is you're actually going to want to go onto the home page of your router. So every router is different. Every person has a different router or a different method of how you do this. I simply just went into my router. My router is Eris. I just traveled into my router using my web browser. I clicked on my utilities tab over here, and then after I clicked on utilities, you can see right here there's actually a DDNS section that you can click on. So I clicked on DDNS, and then from here you're going to want to make sure that you toggle DDNS. This is very important. So you're going to want to enable DDNS. You're going to want to select your provider. So the DDNS service I use is no IP, which I just showed you just a little bit ago. And then here you're just going to put your login information, like your username and then your password for that account that you had made. And then under the domain name section, this is where you input that URL that you created under no IP. And once you're done here, you're going to want to click on apply. Once all these settings are done and you click apply, this is what's going to officially link your no IP to your home network and allow you to actually access that URL outside of your network. But there's just one additional thing that you need to do in order to access this is the IP address that you have assigned to that DDNS URL, you need to make sure that whatever port it uses, that you also go into port forwarding and you open up your ports to access that specific port. But with this URL, it makes it easier to travel in there. It kind of in a way masks your public IP to where people aren't just Google searching your public IP, they're actually Google searching your DDNS URL instead. So it makes it just a little bit safer, but not completely. To completely hide your public IP, that's something that I'm going to be doing a little bit later. So stay tuned, and maybe I might make a video on that explaining how exactly I'm going to be masking my public IP completely. So I just want to thank everybody for watching and hope you have a great day.